I know you have some different views here, but I'd love to hear you elaborate on private property, socialism, and capitalism.
Yeah. I'm absolutely twitching to get at this. I like to frame it in a slightly different way. I mean, obviously, I agree with you because what you're talking about implies a little bit of a moral angle, where it's like if I create it, I have the right to control it, and that is absolutely true. But when we talk to people in moral language about private property, we are pushing against what they're used to. We are pushing against this idea that they're used to paying a 30% tax on income or whatever, and that's normal, and we're paying things with it as, oh, you need to pay your fair share. And there's a lot of this sort of distorted language used by thieves to pretend that it's selfish to keep what you made, and it's somehow not selfish to steal what other people have made. Right. And I agree with all that, but I think there's another angle to look at this which really provides additional clarity, and that is that taking what somebody else has produced and removing their control of it is not simply morally wrong. It's more importantly an anti-civilizational force. It tears down. Yeah. Because what civilization is, what separates us from our bestial state of nature, is that we have this massive pile of stuff and we built that stuff with effort. And that effort is invested by individual human beings in the hopes of controlling what they build and improving their lives. And if you create an environment where someone can come along and take it from you, whether it's a man with a gun or a man with a legal document or a man with powerful friends, then there is no longer an incentive to expend that effort to build. And we stop piling up that stuff, that those resources, that infrastructure, that technology that separates us from chasing the antelopes with sharp sticks. And so this is how private property is not just a moral imperative, it's a survival imperative, it's a civilizational imperative. It's if we steal, if we institutionalize stealing, we can't have nice things. No one can have nice things because no one will make nice things.
Right. No, that's wonderful. Yeah, the pile of stuff that separates us from being cavemen and women, basically. I guess economists would call that like the stock of goods, right? Consumer goods and capital goods. All of this wealth that we've created across generations and accumulated, right? We've accumulated all of these goods, again, consumer and capital goods. And that is civilization in a way, right? I mean, I obviously there's other things that we get. We get these norms. We get, obviously our language improves. We get social institutions. We have these other sort of intangible things that come along with that. But the intangibles are made possible. Like we have the luxury to discover or produce the intangibles by virtue of having accumulated the tangible goods.
Yes.
So this is when you say to attack private property or to violate private property, it is literally a decivilizing force. You're almost like pulling that thread, right? Because the general expectation amongst people in a civilized society is that, right? Like whatever you earn, you get to keep and you can trade it with other people. But if you start to pull that thread and all of a sudden you don't get to keep what you earn, whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%, again, Hoppe makes this point. It's like you start to unwind that process, that pile of goods, capital and consumer goods that's growing ever larger and further separating us from our animalistic ways. There can reach a point where it starts to actually, we start to draw down that stock of goods, and therefore we start regressing as a civilization.
Yeah.
And it's not impossible for that to happen, basically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You're chipping away at the base of the pillar.
Yeah.
And you said something that I want to sort of repeat and emphasize because I think it's so important. All of these intangibles that go with civilization are luxuries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you are 100% correct about that. And a lot of people think of history in terms of social progress. Mm-hmm. And they say, oh, well, we used to live in caves and eat each other. And then somebody said, oog, think it wrong to eat other people. And everybody goes, wow, oog, brilliant. And then we have progress. And that's not how it works. Oh. Justice is a luxury. Oh. Notions of justice and ethics and social progress are luxuries. And this is not that they're not important. This is not that they're not necessary to a civilization, but it's important to understand that they were purchased with material goods.
Right.
Because if you want to have something like the rule of law, if you want to have a justice system, you need police officers and you need courts and you need lawyers and you need all these people who are spending their entire day doing something other than whacking at the dirt with a stick to feed themselves. We have to have all these people employed in giving us this stuff. So we need to have a material wealth enough to feed this system. So all of the ethical progress we have had in civilization is simply a side effect of the material progress. And if the material progress is taken away by people chipping at the base of the pillar, then we will go back to bandit kingdoms and warlords and this sort of thing. And so we need to understand this anti-property forces as not just being anti-civilizational and not just being personally unethical, but as destroying the very thing that allows us to have an ethical and cooperative society.
That's so fucking good. And I'm seeing now the hypocrisy is becoming more emphasized of, say, a modern liberal, for instance, right? Where they're saying tax the rich, right? We need to steal more from the rich, as if that's an ethical claim. Stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, presumably, which is not what they actually do, that is somehow an ethical action that needs to be taken. But what you're describing is it's hypocrisy, right? If you're advocating for theft to steal from someone, you're actually reducing the incentives for anyone to be productive and to add to that stock of goods and services, which is the substrate for all the ethicality and morality and all these other intangibles we have on top. They're actually saying, let's draw down that material base, which draws down the intangibles, but they're asserting it as if it's an intangible good. Right?
They're using the ethics to destroy the ethics.
Yes, it's an inversion.
And it's an inversion in another way as well. Because who are the rich people? The rich people are the rich people who got rich because somebody gave a lot of fucks about what they're doing.
Right.
So when you say we want to take this measure of fucks away from the people who are doing the things that people give a fuck about and give them to people who are doing things that people don't give a fuck about, then we are essentially subverting the revealed preferences of our entire population. We're saying, oh, you know, if you want, we want to tax the people who are, we want to take the value away from the people who are doing things you care about and give it to people who are doing things you don't care about.
Right.
And this is my agent is over there in the corner waving her hands at me, reminding me this is something that I call a death morality.
Okay.
Have you heard me use that term?
No, please.
Okay. A death morality is any morality that destroys the individuals or systems who embrace it.
Okay. Like a nihilism of sorts.
Well, even more than a nihilism, because nihilism I would define as believing in no value system.
Okay.
This is belief in a value system.
Like an anti-value system.
That destroys you so that your ethics no longer exist.
Got it.
Like, I'm going to be too broad-minded to take my own side. I'm going to be anti-bigoted, anti-racist, and prefer people from outside my culture to people in my culture. And this is going to tear down my civilization, and then my ethics will no longer exist because I no longer exist. Right. It's a self-swallowing morality.
Yes. This is the self-destructiveness of evil too, right? That quote came to mind. I don't know if I can say this exactly right. Maybe it's Mark Twain, that a fine is a tax for doing wrong, and a tax is a fine for doing well or doing right. And this idea of just eating the seed corn, right? Where you're, oh, people are hungry, feed them the seed corn, right? It's this short-termist sort of thinking that is it just born of ignorance, I guess? Or we're just, one of the hypotheses I have is that we're sort of emerging from the economic dark ages, largely thanks to Bitcoin eclipsing the central bank, that we're going to wake up to the obvious reality in hindsight that political machinations cannot improve economic reality at all. Actually, all political activity is anti-economic. Is this just a process of that we're awakening to economic reality?
Well, if we look at this from a different angle, if we take sort of a different slice through the apple, what occurs to me when you say this is there is a certain sort of bubble mentality, because when you create civilization, when you create value, you're creating a bubble. You're creating an area, virtual or physical, where the ordinary condition of nature, which is poverty, disease, and death, does not apply.
Right. So and the garden again, right?
Yeah.
Pushing
the
back
garden,
nature a little bit.
The garden, and the garden has a wall.
Yeah.
And when you create the bubble and people live in the bubble long enough, they start to disbelieve in the existence of the bubble. Right. They start to think that the bubble is normal life.
Yeah.
And so what you get with these people who you describe as eating the seed corn or advocating eating the seed corn, their concern is with how do we share the resources, because they have lived in a bubble for so long that they on some level believe that they live in a post-economic society.
Yeah.
And scarcity no longer exists.
They use that term too, post-scarcity world.
The garden covers the world, and now all we have to do is share. So there's this belief that the problem of generating wealth, of advancing civilization, of creating technology is already solved. And nothing we do to redistribute is going to mess with that.
Yeah.
Because it's all sewn up already. And I think that's the reason that you get super rich socialists in the jet set.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe some of it's manipulative, but a lot of it is based on their reality. They live in a bubble where scarcity doesn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
and they mistake the conditions of their bubble for the place that the tech stack has brought the entire universe to.
This is Schopenhauer's coming to mind here, that every man takes the limits of his field of vision for the limits of reality.
Yes.
Right? The people are just in the, as you said, the bubble or the garden, and they are so well insulated from the poverty, disease, death of nature, entropy of nature, that they forget that that's what's real. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.